Good morning everyone and welcome to Hope Church Online. This is my first time hosting online, so if you don't know who I am Ollie, the youth leader at Hope Church. It's great to be with you. So we're going to have a really exciting morning today. We've got Graham speaking to us and we'll have a time of worship at the end. But first we have a promo video from Wildfires. So here it is. Wow, that looks really exciting. I've heard so many great things about Wildfires from people that have been in the past. It looks like a great time to gather with people from other churches across the Pioneer Network. And we've already had some people book into Wildfires, and if you would like to book in, please contact the office. The email address is on the screen now. So I'm now going to hand over to Graham.
Good morning everyone, it's great to be able to share with you on this Sunday morning. It seems like a long while since I've had the opportunity to speak to the church, but it's great to be able to do that this morning. Just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has supported Michelle and I through this difficult time as my dad passed away. We really appreciate that and we'd like to say a huge thank you. Today we're going to start a brand new series, a 3-week series on the 3 core values of the 24/7 prayer movement. Hope Church is a partner church with 24/7 prayer, and the 3 values that 24/7 have are these: prayer, mission and justice. Prayer, mission and justice. And I'm going to start by talking about prayer this week. I'm going to focus on a specific area of prayer. And I'm going to be talking in a little while about prayer as a lament. Prayer as a lament. It's an area of prayer that is not often spoken about and perhaps not that well known for so many Christians. Without going into detail, often when we think about prayer, we think about making requests, we think about praise maybe, we think about all the aspects of asking God for things and petitioning God for things. But there is a very, very important part of prayer called lament. And before I come on to that, I want to share a little bit of a personal story of my last 2 years. Not for you to feel sorry for me, but it'll help bring a bit of a context to explaining why I think prayer as a lament is really, really important. I found the last 2 years really difficult, and here are some reasons. The week after the first lockdown, I woke up one morning and I couldn't see out of my left eye. I immediately went to the opticians who examined me, and he immediately sent me to hospital. And they discovered that I'd had something called a PVD, a post-vitreous detachment. It's the little membrane that sits just above your retina, and this had detached in my left eye and it caused a hemorrhage, a bleed in my left eye. That story then lasted for several months as I was in and out of hospital, and during that time I also had the same happen in my right eye, but thankfully this time without the bleed. The short story of my eyes are this: that by the time I got to June, I'd had to have a cataract replacement in my left eye, and then they discovered that I'd got a tear in my retina, and I had to have that repaired as an emergency in a hospital in London. And here I am like 2 years later, and I have been permanently affected with poorer eyesight. I have to wear sunglasses every time I go out into a bright day, and I'm constantly looking through a cloudy mist. I've had to battle a real journey with my eyes, and like I said today, my eyes are still not right. And then in the April of that first year, we were just going to bed, and then all of a sudden Michelle went into atrial fibrillation and her heart rate went up to 150, 160 beats a minute, and we couldn't get it down, and she was rushed into hospital on a blue light, taken into A&E as an emergency in an ambulance. And I remember when she was going down the road in the ambulance, I was about to follow in the car, and because we were in that first lockdown, the paramedic said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Blake, you can't come." I remember how awful I felt just seeing my wife rushed off to hospital. And then in that September, I was taken into hospital. I was rushed into hospital also as an emergency. I'd had chest pains and felt very dizzy, and I had to have an angiogram for my heart, and it's discovered that I've got apparently some angina, so I'm now on medication. So we had like this really tough year with my eyes, with Michelle being rushed into hospital. Jack and Kate's wedding had been cancelled. I was taken into hospital. And then we get into 2021, and my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He had thyroid cancer, and he had major surgery, a 5-hour operation. And he then went on to more medication, and it had a real impact. He then lost his voice, and he wasn't able to speak from then on really that well at all. And we were having to journey that with my dad. We get through that, and then Michelle's dad was not feeling very well one week, and he then went to hospital. And the short story is that Mike was then diagnosed with the most aggressive brain cancer you could possibly imagine. And from diagnosis in that March, Mike sadly passed away in that June. That was a really, really sad and tough time for us as a family. And then to kind of cap it all, you know, we came into 2022, and my dad suddenly went downhill health-wise. He had another heart attack, was taken into hospital, and just 6 days later, my own dad died. And so in the last 8 months, both Michelle and I have had the sadness of seeing both of our dads pass away. Our granddaughter was born prematurely, 6 weeks, and it was pretty traumatic. And if you're a dog owner, you'll understand this. Our lovely family dog had to be put down the same week that my dad died. Now, I'm not telling you all of that because I want you to say, "Ah, how terrible," although it has been really terrible. But what actually happened to me was this, that all of those events took me to a really, really difficult place personally. In fact, I'm just going to be really honest with you this morning, right? Last July, all of this finally got the better of me. You know, Michelle's dad had died. We were going through the cancer with my dad. We hadn't even faced my dad's passing yet. But last July, I found myself in, I've got to be honest, the darkest place I've ever been in my life. And I actually felt like I couldn't go on. I didn't really, for the first time in my life, I didn't want to live. It was horrible. And for the first time in my life, I had to admit that I can't carry on without some help. And for 6-7 weeks, I had to go through a period of having personal therapy and counselling by a professional counsellor who happened to be a Christian. Why am I saying all of that? Because over those 2 years, there were times when I didn't feel like calling on God. I didn't feel like making my requests known. My prayer life has taken a real hit. I've struggled. I've loved praying with others, but I've really struggled to pray alone. And as I look back, I think it's because I actually felt alone. It wasn't that I didn't have a great family around me. I had a great church around me. I had some great friends, but inside I felt so alone, and I was in such a dark place. One of the questions that my counsellor asked me was this: do you feel abandoned by God? Do you feel abandoned by God? And I kind of put my church leader's hat on and said, well, I know God hasn't abandoned me. And he said, that's not what I asked you, Graham. I actually asked you, do you actually feel abandoned by God? And you know, I had to honestly say to him, I do. I do feel abandoned by God. I felt like God had kind of left me. I felt all that had gone on in our lives was just too much to take. And where was God in that time? And I think there is a really, really beautiful prayer, a really type of prayer that we find time and time again in so many stories of biblical characters. And if you read the Psalms, it comes up time and time again. And it's this whole thing of learning to lament in prayer. You know, you and I, we stepped into this world with a cry, didn't we? The first noise that we made was a cry. And I guess none of us remember that moment. We don't remember the first sound we uttered after we left the beautiful protected confines of our mother's womb. But when we came out into this wide world, you know, to know that we were here, we let out a cry. I read something once, and I think this is beautiful. To cry is human. To cry is human. The cry of the heart is so important. It's not just humans, is it, that experience the cry or the groaning or the moaning. Paul writes these beautiful words in Romans 8 verse 22. He says this. He says, we know that the whole of creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to this present time. You see, along with the fall of Adam, the whole created world was infected with the brokenness of sin. Death, as I have experienced and many of us have experienced with loved ones, either friends or family, death is the ultimate reminder that something is not right in this world. But death is not the only reminder that something is not right in this world. There are other examples: cancer, addictions, failed marriages, relational conflict, loneliness, depression, abuse. There are so many reminders, even as I speak this morning, as we look around and see the horror of the war that's happening in Ukraine. We are reminded that this world is incredibly broken and sin has such an impact. You see, we don't stop crying after birth. It continues because the world is broken. While tears and sorrow are part of our humanity, there is often a neglected prayer language in the Bible for our journey through that broken world. And I've discovered something over this last couple of years, that when I found it difficult to make my requests known, when I found it really hard to pray, and in fact actually not had the strength or the courage or even the desire to pray at times, I've learned that there is a prayer called lament. What is lament? Well, actually, lament is more than actually crying tears. It's a cry of the heart. It's a cry out to God when the sorrow that comes from the hurt and the pain that is deep within us cries out to God. It groans, it moans, there is this heart pain that just cries out to God. And when we look in the Bible, we discover that the Bible is absolutely filled with the prayers of lament. Did you know that over a third of the Psalms are laments? The book of Lamentations is all about the weeping over the destruction of Jerusalem. Jesus lamented in his final hours of his life on earth. We read in Matthew 26 verse 9, as Jesus is in the garden on his own, it says he, going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and he prayed these famous words that we all know so well. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will, your will be done. Jesus had a lament. There was a pain, a deep, deep pain in his heart. And all he could pray was, God, take this pain away from me. It was a lament. It was a cry, a sorrow deep within his very core. God, I don't want to go through with this. I can't cope with this anymore. Please take this away from me. And yet he mentioned those beautiful words, but not my will, but your will be done. I love this quote, and it says this: laments turn towards God when sorrow alone tempts you to run from him. You see, I think when we learn the prayer of lament, even though we're going through deep, deep pain and we don't know naturally which way to turn and we think our whole world is caving in, we can cry out to God from the depths of our heart, from the sorrow and the pain that is within, and we can lament. We don't have to pray any other prayers. Maybe that's the only prayer that we can pray. And that lament hopefully turns us towards God when the sorrow of the pain that we're in is tempting us to run away from Him. Lament is that beautiful form of prayer. It's more than just the expression of sorrow or the venting of emotion. Lament talks to God about the pain that we are in. And do you know what I believe is the unique purpose of the lament of prayer? The purpose is trust. That as we cry out to God in prayer from the deep pain and sorrow that is going on in our hearts, God is wanting us to turn that lament into a trust in Him. It's an invitation to pour out our fears and our frustrations and our sorrows for the purpose of helping us to renew our confidence back in God. And I want to leave you in this last few minutes with 4 quick things that I think help us lament. You know, maybe today you're going through a really, really difficult time. Maybe the effects of COVID have been strong in you. Maybe there is a real fear in you. Maybe there is a real desperation in you right now. Maybe you feel God has completely abandoned you. Maybe you feel alone in your life right now. Maybe you've suffered the anguish of bereavement in this last season of your life. Or maybe you've suffered some of the other effects of the deep pain that life and sin ultimately can bring into our lives. Maybe it's been through illness or a relational breakdown, whatever that is. But there's this sense of, God, where are you? And I want to just pick on one psalm really quickly, Psalm 13. There are only 6 verses in this psalm, but it illustrates lament beautifully. And the first point that I want to make for lament is this. If you're in that situation of deep pain and sorrow and there is that lament coming from your heart, here's the first point. Turn to God and be honest. Psalm 13 verse 1 starts like this. How long, O Lord? ? Will you forget me forever? ? How long will you hide your face from me? The point here is this, that the person in pain is actually choosing to talk to God about what is happening. They're actually choosing to turn towards God and be completely honest with the deep questions of their lament. If you're going through that, I want to encourage you, turn towards God and be honest with Him. I've often seen people, when they go through incredibly painful times in their lives, they turn away from God. If you're going through that kind of time right now, don't turn away from Him. Turn towards Him. My second point is this. Bring your complaint. It says in verse 2 of that psalm, how long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? You know, every lament features some kind of complaint. It's more than a sinful rehearsing of our anger. A biblical lament humbly and honestly identifies the pain within. It asks the questions and it allows my raging soul to bear its frustrations. It's okay to complain. Sometimes complaining is often seen as negative. You know, you might hear of somebody, oh, he's always complaining. But making a complaint is also an honest endeavour to make your feelings known. And so my second point is this. When you lament, bring your complaint to God. God's okay with that. He really is. And my third point is ask boldly for help. You know, the psalm says here in verses 3 and 4, O Lord my God, light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have prevailed over him, lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. He says, consider me, consider and ask me, O Lord my God, light up my eyes. You know, in your lament, don't be afraid to ask boldly for God's help. unremitting sorrow can sometimes create a real silence. I think when I was going through the depths of my pain last year, I went very quiet. I went very withdrawn, very within myself. I almost became vacant, and I lost that sense of asking boldly for God's help. And I had to learn to allow God to help me be totally transparent and honest with him. You see, lament invites us to dare to hope in God's promises as we ask for his help. And so I want to say to you, make sure that you ask for God's help. Even if that's all you can do, say, God, I need your help so much right now. Would you please help me? And then the fourth point is this: choose to trust. Choose to trust. Like I said just now, the destination for our lament is here. All the roads lead here. It says there in this, it says, but I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. You know, the most important thing the lament of prayer can turn us to is, God, I trust you. As we navigate through our brokenness, and lament becomes my prayer language, it's how we talk to God about our sorrows. We begin to renew our hope in his sovereign care over our lives. The practice of lament is one of the best things I think a Christian can do when they have so much sorrow and pain in their lives. You see, on the one hand, we know God is sovereign and good. We know his promises in his word. We believe in God's power to deliver. We know that the tomb is empty and that Jesus is alive. And so on one hand, we believe all of that. And yet on the other hand, we still experience the pain. We still experience the sorrow. And I believe that lament is the language for living between those two tensions, of knowing the sovereignty of God, knowing the promise of God, knowing that Jesus is alive, knowing that the tomb is empty, but at the same time living with the pain of our soul and the sorrow of our heart. And it's like the prayer of lament journeys us. It actually kind of helps us to hold both of those things in real good, healthy tension. Lament is a prayer form for people who are waiting for the day Jesus will return and make everything right. Christians don't just mourn. We long for God to end the pain, and we know that one day he will. It says in Revelation 21 verse 4 that there'll be a day where he wipes away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be any mourning, no crying, no pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And so I want to encourage us this morning. If you're in that place of real sorrow or pain in your heart, learn the art of lament. Learn to be honest. Learn to bring your complaint. Learn to turn to God. But put your trust in him. Allow the prayer of your lament to trust in his unfailing love and his incredible mercy and grace over us today. May we learn as Christians the prayer of lament. It is so powerful. And I think in my prayer life that has been so hard this last 2 years, I think I've begun to learn something about the power of the lament. May God bless you, and I hope this has helped you in some way today. Thank you.
Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope with no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested and my life began, ash was redeemed, only beauty remains. My orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested and my life began, washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. Shame was a ransom we faithfully bore. He canceled my death and he called me his friend. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. And our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoices, though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose with our freedom in hand. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested, my life began. When death was arrested, my life began. When death was arrested, my life began.
Wow, that was great, wasn't it? Thank you, Graham, for the talk. It was a great reminder of how powerful prayer can be when it comes from the heart crying out. And thank you for being so open and honest with us. It was really powerful. So I want to close in prayer. Lord, thank you that you're our God that hears our prayers. Lord, I just want to pray for anyone that this week is using prayer as a lament, that you hear their prayers and that you answer their prayers and you provide breakthrough into those situations, Lord Jesus. Amen. If you want to hear any of our worship songs individually or in your own time, head over to our YouTube page into our playlist section where we have a Hope Church worship playlist filled with all the lyric video songs that we use on a Sunday morning. Now all I have to say is have a good week and thank you for joining us.